All right, everybody, here we are in lecture 8 of our course, the last lecture where we're gonna close the course with some review and final thoughts. So the format we worked during this course was unfreeze, change, and freeze. And by that we meant by unfreezing, understand how each one of us make decisions and how System 1 and System 2 each play their roles in decision making. So this is the first step of how to be better decision makers, understanding how our systems work. Understand how context and environment influences decision due to association with System 1, automatic reactions. After becoming familiar with your own decision making, you understand how others make decisions and where they use heuristics and where are they affected by biases. And lastly, use the tools that behavior economics present in order to nudge and influence decisions. So this is the unfreeze part. On the change part, we are now we have tools of tweaking and avoiding the biases that will cloud our decision making, and not only for us but for others as well. Understand the role of nudges, when to apply them with success and when they might fail to change the outcomes of decision. Bring awareness of System 1 pitfalls. Everybody uses System 1 as much as they possibly can, but it comes with pitfalls, and you should be able now to understand those where people use System 1 more than they actually should. And then once you get this, you will freeze your knowledge in place, and now you're going to be on the lookout on the interactions between System 1 and System 2. The System 2 has a role, and that is to train System 1. Therefore, we're making us better decision making overall. It's a slow process. It doesn't happen. Our System 1 is very strong. It has millions of years of evolution, and it's not that easy to be changed. Okay, so we're going to end the course with some practical guidance. Nearly everyone has something to say about how we make decisions. Psychologists made the most contribution, thus easily dismissed by econs, since they were not able to model them into a traditional economics model. Not too far in the corporate world is the corporate world, which also wasn't able to model them into spreadsheets and neatly designed schedules. And you wonder why projects continue to fail on both schedule and budget. There is not a unique theory of decision making as physicists try to find. Theory in psychology gets more complex. You can give a physicist a few pieces of information and a couple of equations, and she can calculate the precise location of a planet hundreds of years in the past or hundreds of years in the future. You can give the psychologist all the information about the person from the moment of birth, and she will not be able to tell you what that person will have for lunch tomorrow. It's not as clear. There are so many things at stake and at work. Human decision making is complex. It's what the scientists call a high causal density phenomenon. That means there are a lot of potential causes driving anyone's decision. So we're going to look into this practical guidance of how to improve and predict decision making, and we call them the 5 R's, because they're all talking about different preferences. The purpose of studying decision making, as we close it, is to help us understand others better, to help us understand us better, and to make us better off. Not all theory works in the real world because it's too much noise, so we have to test before we charge in. Start with proven theories and avoid the shiny object syndrome, where you go and look for the new kid on the block, the new theory that came up, the one that all the newspapers are going for, and that's not what you want. You want to you shouldn't start with the sexy, new, exciting findings, the type you find in New York Times, but instead use well-done, replicated research findings that are used again and again, tested and retested, and this is what I try to give you in this course, solid foundation based on solid findings. So the first R, the first rule, number one, is reference points matter. And so many theories we discussed in this course are based on people having reference points, or rather the lack of good reference points. Loss aversion and its most prominent implication, the endowment effect, are both reference point effects. We know that losses loom larger than gains, but how is it a gain or loss determined? Well, by comparing them with a reference point. If we want to understand how people evaluate options and ultimately make decisions, we must understand reference points and what reference points bring to the decision. I want to give you an example from my professor, Richard Taylor, who developed a stylized example to illustrate this point. Suppose you run the only gas station in a small town. Your credit card processor charges you a transaction fee that you have decided you want to pass it along to your consumers. Specifically, you want to charge your customers an extra 5 cents per gallon. Should you post a lower price for gas out on your big sign on the front and then hit your customers that pay with credit cards with an extra 5 cents per gallon penalty, or post a higher price for gas and offer cash customer a discounted rate? Would one of these mathematically equivalent situations be better received by your customers? So let's use a reference point to see how this works. Let's suppose that the base price serves us as a reference point. Remember, you have the only gas station in town. In the first case, your cash customers pay the price posted. Their experience would be relatively neutral. But the credit card customers, when they pull up to fill their tanks, will be paying a higher rate as evaluated relative to the advertised price. For them, this higher price will come in as a loss, and they won't be happy about it. But what about the second case? When you post a higher base price, your credit card customer will be paying the reference price, the advertised rate. So they will experience a relatively neutral transaction, but the cash customers are now paying less than the reference point. They're in the gain territory, and they'll feel great about buying gas from you. So without changing the actual price you charge either group, you have now gone from some of your customers feeling neutral and the rest feeling unhappy to one group feeling happy and the rest neutral, just by changing the reference point. So if we want to understand how people evaluate options and make decisions, we have to look into reference. What people do when they don't have reference points? They try to pick the default option, assuming there is one, the easiest one possible. Rely on some other effect, like a halo effect. So this reference point is quite powerful and is something that you will have. It transforms gains into losses or losses into gain. Therefore, it allows for the framing effect as well. Reason number 2. Reasons matter. So people often make decisions by picking options we feel we can justify to ourselves or to others. And this is not necessarily surprising, but what is surprising is that the reasons don't have to be all that good. They don't have to be logical or even compelling reasons. Example, a cake mix company running a promotion on a collectible plate. What do you think? Is it a good thing or is it the bad thing? Right? So they are running a promotion, and they obviously think it's a good thing, but because you like or you don't need a new collection plate, could be a reason for you not to choose to buy the cake mix. Okay, so you got to, especially if you work in marketing or in some ways, you have to make sure that you understand the reason why people would buy and buy nothing. If if you are working with this cake mix company and you want to send a gift or a token of appreciation to your customer as a collectible plate, just because I don't need a plate, or I don't want a plate, or I don't like the plate, is going to be a reason for me not to buy your cake mix. Seemingly unrelated, they are related. So it is perfectly possible that one particular choice to be more likely to be selected and more likely to be rejected. Selected for positive reason, rejected for negative reason. Point number 3, resources matter. What kind of resources? Cognitive resources. We are limited in terms of attention, effort, and self-control. That's system 2. We discussed that system 2 mental energy units are not to be given away for free. They are costly to us, and we are protecting them for the time when we really need them, if the time comes. So this has 2 implications. One, our decision making will be a function of whatever resources are available to us at that moment. If system 1 is busy, then we have system 2 to make a decision. Slow, calculated. If system 2 is busy, then we only have system 1 that we can make a decision. And not only system 2 is busy, but system 2 doesn't want to participate, as we know that is a little bit of a lazy policeman, as Daniel Kahneman calls it. And then second implication would be that we are strategic in how we spend these scarce resources. We're cognitive misers, only tapping into these cognitive resources if we have to, and otherwise relying on easier ways of deciding, like system 1. So we only use system 2, the heavy cavalry, if we really have to. Maybe we can get by not doing that and using only system 1. Don't make me think if I don't have to. This is an important piece of a system 2. People don't like to think if they don't have to. Thinking, the way I refer to it, is using mental energy units, and it's a system 2 characteristic. Point number 4, replacement matter. That is the idea that people have a lot of workaround when they are presented with a difficult task. So people will often substitute or replace a difficult task with an easier one. We are trying to stall, avoid, postpone until eventually the deadline comes up to us if necessary. Our response will be to find a similar but easier question to answer. We replace a difficult question with an easier one. Okay? For example, imagine that I have to decide if I need a flood insurance rider. Doing it right requires to gather lots of information and process it very carefully. This is a hard thing for me to do. Instead, I use the availability heuristic and I probe my mind to see how available that information is to me. How hard it is for me to remember flooded houses, or even my house flooded. So I'm replacing one difficult question that requires a lot of cognitive resources with an easier question that I can answer relatively easy. The answer to the easier question will satisfy, will be good enough. And this is how we go about it. Reason number 4, or the conclusion number 4, is that range matters. Your coffee shop is 15 minutes away and your favorite coffee cup with biscotti costs $5. There's a nearby coffee shop where the cup of coffee and biscotti costs $10. Will you drive 15 minutes for your favorite cup of coffee? Most people say they would, saving time, money over time. Same different scenario. You saw a jacket you like at a shop nearby for $100. A friend tells you that the same jacket costs $95 at a shop located 15 minutes away. Will you drive 15 minutes to buy the jacket for $5 less? Most people say they would not, thus saving time over money. It is the same question, will you drive 15 minutes for $5? So why the difference? Is the same problem, driving 15 minutes to save $5. In the first place, $5 out of $10 is 50%. In the other example, $5 out of 100 is 5%. So the range is different and we treat this differently. Our sense of a meaningful difference in some quantity is inverse proportional with its range. Each extra dollar over the $5 for a typical cup of coffee represents 20% of that price, a huge range effect. The relative change in price is too big to be ignored. The same $5 saving represents a large proportion of the range when we're purchasing coffee, but a much smaller proportion when we're buying a jacket, and a tiny proportion when we're buying a television set, for example. So our perception of $5 changes depending on the range. Range effect is related to reference point. Outcomes of a decision are good or bad, not based on their absolute value, but on a relative value compared to a reference point. We reset our sense of value, so outcomes better than the reference point are seen as good, and outcomes worse than the reference point are seen as bad. So, in order to get the effect or multiply the effect of a nudge, you have to stack the deck. Layer insights on top of each other to create a much powerful nudge or change of habit. Don't try to be elegant or subtle. If you want to change the way some group of people is making decision, go in there with a sledgehammer, psychologically speaking. Because decision making is a high casual density process, it has lots of noise and it takes a lot to break this noise. For example, the SMART program of helping people saving towards retirement, the 401k automatic retirement plan that we've been talking about, it's a highly successful program. It put few of these effects on top of each other. Loss aversion, don't lose the employer match and enroll now. Pre-commitment, each time you get a salary increase, commit to add a certain percentage to the saving. And default, super strong default, automatic enrollment with nothing to do on the employee's part, which is the path of the least resistance. And it works so well, and it continues to work well. In conclusion, and this is the conclusion for the entire course, I hope you enjoyed this course. I hope that you got a lot of information about how we make decisions, how we try to change this process of decision making, and how can we freeze it in place by understanding about system 1, system 2, the interaction between them, and the way to use nudges and in those frameworks that we talked, so we can get the great effect and a super interesting and powerful change in our decision making process. And I hope that you go in and design interfaces, user interfaces, environments, and context so they can influence user decision. Remember, we don't necessarily always have access to the user. We know theoretically who the target audience is. We don't have access to the user. We know what the action the user want to take. We know that. So the only thing we have access to is the environment. So we use choice architecture to design an environment where people can make better decisions and they're going to be better off in terms of health, wealth, and family. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great time in this course.